I see my other guest in the background. He is a favorite of mine, the man himself, Professor Richard Wolff. How you doing, Professor? You doing okay today?
All right, Jamal. How about yourself?
I am doing fine. I am better that you are joining me. I always appreciate these conversations, especially when there's economic news that is on the marquee. You are the guy that break this stuff down. And just for the audience to know, that, Professor Richard Wolff, he is Professor of Economic Emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs of the New School University, New York City. He is founder of Democracy at Work, fantastic program, and host of the nationally syndicated show Economic Update. Latest books, System is the Sickness, unless you have a new book. Do you have another book out? Just, I don't know. I
Yep.
may need to update my records.
It's called Understanding Capitalism, and you can get it everywhere. But our website, democracyatwork.info, is the easiest way.
Excellent. Understanding Capitalism. Professor, there is economic news afoot. Um, so apparently, the job numbers that have come in are negative 32,000 this month. Negative 32,000. Last month, they've been revised down from 54,000 to negative 3,000. This is called acceleration in my old physics textbooks. The rate of change at at a particular time frame. What is going on with this? I mean, Donald Trump's economy, he keeps telling me that the world is great, that America is killing it. It seems that the dollar is dropping in value. It seems that tariff prices have increased the cost of everyday items, especially groceries. And I'm confused. The president told me that this was the world's greatest economy.
Well, let me be as polite as I know how. In deference to your audience, in deference to you, in deference to the powers that be. I would say that the relationship between what Mr. Trump says and the truth is a very complicated, delicate relationship that invites much harsher words than I just used. Uh, the American economy, as I have been working for about 2 years now to explain, is a declining capitalism and a declining empire. Indeed, your previous speaker spoke to that, your guest. Uh, Other people are doing it. I understand it's very hard for Americans, and I mean it, for understandable reasons, to accept this, to face it, to stop denying it. It, it is a way to understand what's happening to us. And most of the people I meet are saying, what's going on in America? It seems chaotic. It seems scary. It seems, all those kinds of words. You get it. I get it. We're swimming in it.
Yeah.
And all I want to do, like any thinking person, is I want to understand what's happening so I can hopefully change it. I want to explain to people that the American economy was, after World War II, going all the way back to 1945, the end of World War II, uh, we were the top of the world. We were the major economy. The whole world switched to use the US dollar, which it didn't do before that. American trade was the most important thing any company anywhere could hope to engage. We had the biggest shipping. We had the biggest military. Just biggest, bestest, because all the rest of the world had literally blown themselves up. That's what World War II was. England destroyed Germany. Germany did its best to destroy Russia. They all ganged up on France and Italy, and on and on and on. Japan, ends up the war having two atomic bombs drop on major cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and so forth. This is it's very hard if you've been the dominant economy for a long time to suddenly, and of course it shouldn't have been suddenly, you should have figured it out years ago that this was not a sustainable arrangement. This was very odd. This was the result of an unprecedented war. I mean, it should have been clear to people that the conditions of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and couldn't last. But people being the way they are, it was a wonderfully pleasant idea to think that the United States would forever be the dominant economy in the world.
Yeah.
And it isn't. And it stopped. And it stopped for many reasons. The biggest ones were the old capitalist rule: you go where the profits are the biggest. That's what a capitalist does. That's what an investor wants, to go where the profits are the highest. They leave the areas that aren't making money in order to go find and invest in the places that are. And by the late 1970s, let's say, we had the great moment. We should have recognized it then. We didn't. So we went through this moment. It was, think of it like an aha moment among corporate executives. And they're going, you know, the working class of America has been very successful, struggling for a century to get better wages, to get better living conditions, to go from poverty to a decent standard of living. And they've been, and we raised the wages when they had strikes, and we tried. I'm trying to be nice to the CEOs. We tried to meet them halfway. But now we got a situation where they get a decent pay, and they have a car, and they have a home, and they can take a vacation. But then there are all these workers in China, in India, in Brazil. They don't have any of those things. They're willing to work for a fraction of what an American worker demands. And now with the jet engine, that becomes important in the 1970s. And with the internet, that becomes important in the 1970s. We can have a factory or an office or a store in China, and we can supervise it with the internet as easily as we used to supervise the store across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all these workers who are eager for us to come there, eager to take a job, and willing to work at a small fraction. So here's what they did, and Americans know this. I'm not telling you anything you didn't know already. American businesses said goodbye to the United States. If you want the honest truth, they abandoned the United States. And that's what they had done earlier. Capitalism starts in New England, then it goes to the Midwest. You know what we call the Midwest now? The Rust Belt. You know why? Because the capitalists left. Detroit in 1970 had 2 million people. Today, the population of Detroit is 700,000. The majority of the people of Detroit had to go because there was no work. Those jobs had been sent overseas. Those are the jobs you're taking advantage of when you drive a VW or a Toyota or many of the cars that were produced there before we made some of them come back and produce here.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is we've been losing jobs. One of the reasons we didn't feel it is also something that happened in the 1970s that we all know about, but we don't want to talk about, which is the American workers stopped having higher wages.
Oh, right.
American corporations said, I'm not paying you any higher wages. I got much cheaper workers around the world. That's where I'm going. I'm not paying you higher wages. I'm not even keeping this job for you. So the only way you worker American, the only way you're going to keep the nice standard of living you achieved is two things. You've got to send all the women out to work. None of this housewife anymore. She's got to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day at the factory or the office or the store, just like you. And that won't be enough. If you really want to keep your standard of living, in addition to having the wife work, and I know African Americans, the wives had been working a long time. I'm talking here about the white people who went out, the white wives. But the other thing everybody had to do to keep up their standard of living was go into debt on the scale no working class in the world ever did before. It's in the 1970s that the banks of this country decide to put credit cards in every wallet. One of them, two of them, six of them. What difference does it make? The average interest rate, on a credit card right now is between 17 and 20%. Of course, the banks could make a ton of money by getting the consumer hooked. It's a bigger addiction than heroin or cocaine ever were.
Yeah.
And so
Free
we
money.
had an economy based on this. And now, the last point, it's over. It's over because another economic powerhouse grew up in the last 50 years. It's called China. And you can pretend all day you want, and you can make criticisms. The Chinese have their problems. It's not like we do. We have our problems. They have their problems. But they can produce most of what we consume better or cheaper or both. I'll give you just one example.
BYD.
The best quality, cheapest electric vehicle, car or truck, on this planet today is made by something called the BYD Corporation. Those three letters, BYD. By the way, stands for Build Your Dream. English words, but it's a Chinese company. They're it. If you go, a few weeks ago, I was in Paris, France. The cabs on the street in Paris, BYD. Everywhere in the world except here. Here, Mr. Trump put a tariff on them. Mr. Biden raised the tariff to 100%. So if you want a BYD car, send 30 grand to China, they'll ship the car. But you can't pick it up at the dock unless you pay the tariff 100%. That's another 30. So it'll cost you 60. So nobody does it. They go and they buy an inferior car from Tesla or from General Motors or Ford or whoever, pay about 50 to 60 grand for a car that isn't as good as what BYD would give them for 30, except for our government. You know, this is called shooting yourself in the foot. The whole world is turning away from American cars and trucks. Not because they aren't good, but because they can do better with the Chinese. Look, that's one of the reasons if you look at the toaster you're about to buy, it's made in China. Or the socks on your feet, or the carburetor in that car which says Chevy on the outside, and it is a Chevy, but that carburetor, that was made in China and then shipped over here. Here's the problem. Unless we make big changes, and there's no nice way to put this, we're going down. And that's what those numbers, the correction of the numbers, because we were happy with the nice numbers, because like with credit, it's not real. You got to pay that back. And now finally, the big one. And Jamal, this is something, if I can make a suggestion, we need your program here to deal with. When a country is in turmoil like this, why are we surprised? We have a government sending its own troops into our cities.
Yes.
We have a president who addresses the generals and tells them, use American cities as your training ground. What? No CEO, including American, no CEO is going to move a factory into a country that's acting like that. You know why? Because it's not safe. You don't know, one day half your workers won't show up because the military is training in their neighborhoods. Or maybe ICE has come through and arrested half the people who live in the neighborhood and who have been working in that factory for 20 years. And what's the factory going to do? That's why there are no jobs coming here anymore. And we listen to a president who says, and I take him at his word, he wants to bring jobs back. Okay, Mr. Trump, but the last way on earth to do that is to have endless pictures of ICE agents beating up some old lady in a train station. What are you doing? It's like an advertisement to people, don't bring your factory here. Because here people are in very great turmoil. They're very upset. The social divisions run really deep. We're seeing the revival of regional hostility, violence, white supremacy. All of those things are things that make business people run the other direction. And that shouldn't surprise anyone. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Trump. If you're going to make turmoil at home by beating up on your political opponents, you're not going to bring jobs back. You want to bring jobs back? I mean, let me give you one more. The government shut down. Okay, that's a screaming advertisement to the rest of the world. Don't come here to do business. They can't even keep their government open. We don't know whether the garbage will be collected. The police will do their job. The firemen will come when it burns. I mean, what? What kind of chaos are you advertising? And the answer is, businessmen are saying, I'm not leaving China to go back to the United States. None of those things are happening in China, whatever the reasons for that might be. I'm not here to endorse China or to attack China. I'm just trying to explain to my fellow Americans. Remember, I'm born in Ohio. I've lived and worked here all my life. I'm telling you, we are in a situation we have to wake up, face what we're going through, the decline of an empire. You know, it has happened to every other empire in the history of the human race.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Empire was Asia, Africa. It was born, it developed, and then it passed away. We were born, we developed. You know where we are now? We're into passing away. And you can do that gently, and you can plan how to manage it. I think the Chinese have let us see they'll meet us halfway. If we don't do that, we're going to have a war, and that's the end for everybody.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read Peter Turchin's book, The End, what is it called, The End, or End Days. And Turchin makes a similar argument that you're making, but he makes it slightly different. He makes it, in this case, of overproduction of elites. And this is combined with immiseration of the working class.
Right.
And in this kind of immiseration of the working class, you have so many elites that they set policy, point of view, and they lose the ability to change anything in the context of the political system because they don't believe anything needs to change. We're fantastically wealthy. Why do we need to change anything? And whereas you get the poor, the working class has a much like a worse and worse and worse time point, up until the point where there's a conflict between wannabe elites that realize they can't be elites because all of the slots are filled. And those wannabe elites effectively use the immiseration of the working class as a, let's say, as a tool, as a cudgel to overthrow the current ruling order, in which case you get a revolution or you get a civil war. And he goes all throughout history and points out society after society after society. I mean, it's like painstaking going throughout history to make this case. you pointed out that you think there's going to be a war. And it does seem like things are accelerating in regards to the United States. I mean, I've never seen a president say, I'm going to put troops into democratic cities for hashtag reasons. Or a president get up and says, I'm going to send you to San Francisco, and to Chicago, and to et cetera, et cetera. And then you guys, well, why? Just because. These are my democratic opposition. That's why I'm going to send it. If that's the honest answer to it. Things do seem like they're accelerating, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like they seem like they're getting progressively worse and speeding up in the process of it getting worse.
No, I think you're right. I think it's a very interesting approach. I know that I have felt, and I know other people that I speak to have felt, looking at the speeches made by Mr. Trump and his associates, and we had a little of that before with Mr. Biden too, that you're listening to somebody who lives in another planet. In other words, you're listening to someone where your first reaction is to say, how could you be so out of touch with the reality you have to deal with? I mean, let me give you an example from yesterday's news. I'm reading a plan for Gaza, which I remember reading several years ago.
20-point plan, yeah.
Yeah, it's just rehash. It's been rejected already, so I'm saying to myself, okay, well, but then I get to a point and I read it and my jaw drops. The idea is to have a new government in Gaza run by Tony Blair.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, it's just, I don't know where to go. This is a man who was literally run out of his job in England because he was a liar, because he told the British people that he knew there were weapons of mass destruction in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. There weren't. But he knew it, but there weren't. And instead of being skeptical, or instead of keeping his mouth shut, he went and he supported the war in Iraq with great enthusiasm, costing Britain billions of dollars it could not afford, losing British lives, which it should not have. So he is a disaster in his own country. And what? Does that qualify? Oh, my God. And then the fact that the Palestinians have been screwed by Europeans on a scale that we all are shaking our heads. And you're going to take another European and put him in charge. I mean, the world is full of interesting people who might do that job. Him?
Yeah.
That means you're tone deaf. That means that in the middle of a rock concert, you're playing Beethoven, and you're not aware that Beethoven isn't a big figure in the rock world, right? And wow. And so, yeah, I like this idea that you have these elites in charge, and I'm enjoying the media as they talk about Hedgepeth or whatever his name is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Talking to an audience of, I don't know, 300 generals and admirals who sit there. Even Trump remarked on it in stony silence, because I'm hoping, but I think they also may be noticing that, wow, wherever they came from around the world to be at that meeting, they realize they've been out of touch, because this is crazy what we're listening to, What are we going to stop being busy in Asia and Africa because we got to go invade Chicago? I mean, come on. What is this? But Jamal, it is the case that efforts like this to roll back history, to make capitalism in its dying period a lively young teenager again, that doesn't work. You can't be a teenager again. I can't be, and America can't be what it was. If you think it was great, that's your business. But going backwards, it's not a plan. It's not available. It's like saying, I have a plan to jump over the Empire State Building. It's very nice that you have a plan. It's very nice that you're doing a lot of training. But I got news for you. You're not jumping over the Empire State Building. I know enough about the human body and the heights. You ain't going to make it. And I know enough about the history of economic systems that going backwards, not an option. So I got a deal in my brain with a group of people, an elite, as you put it, who seem to be committed to doing that and now are discovering that they can't do it. Mr. Trump promised to bring jobs here. He's losing jobs. He promised to end the Ukraine war. No end in sight. He promised to end the Gaza horror. There's no real end in sight there either. Meanwhile, he bombed Iran and he's killing people in boats near Venezuela. What happened to the president who isn't going to have endless wars? He's having endless wars. And now he wants to add a domestic war to the ones he's doing. I mean, this is out of control.
Yeah, that's what it feels to me too. Can I get one last question? And this is on Europe and the U.S. If Europe seems to be in the same boat that the U.S. is in, if not worse. In fact, I would say Europe is in a worse boat. Germany has been bleeding jobs like to the tune of hundreds of thousands. France's government literally just collapsed. Screaming headlines saying that the UK and France would need IMF bailout loans, which is pretty astonishing because that's usually for poor countries that they can effectively steal resources from. Europe seems to be in a worse spot. And if the US can't go back to its former glory, Europe damn sure can't go back.
Right. Yeah, and here's how Europe is handling it. It's demonizing Russia. It's as if going back has meant reviving the Cold War. Make it out to your people. The Russians are gearing up to invade. No evidence for it. The Russians can't afford it. The Russians couldn't do it anyway. They're having a hard enough time fighting in Ukraine. And Ukraine, I want to remind people, is the poorest country in Europe. So the Russians are fighting, granted, with Western money and Western weapons, but nonetheless, the Russians are busy. They don't need and they don't want another wider war, especially when they might lose. So this is silly, but you begin to understand it because the whole situation in Russia is so bad, in Western Europe is so bad that the leaders there, they don't know what to do. Mr. Trump is bailing on them. I'm not helping you anymore, he says. I'm hitting you with a tariff. You have to invest your money here. Screw you. You're my ally. You'll be sorry about it. That's what he's telling them. They're very angry, but they dare not confront him because he could make it even worse. So they pile on Russia. So we have to listen to endless Europeans making up nonsense about Russia. It's pathetic. It's a pathetic effort to scapegoat. We have immigrants. They have Russians. They have a little bit with the immigrants. Good. We have a little bit with the Russians. This is childish. This is the effort to deflect a dying system onto make-believe dangers because you dare not admit the real danger that you're in, which is the decline of your system. That's the issue.
Professor, you are fantastic. You're always fantastic. I always appreciate when you join me on this, and I always thank you for it. And just to give to the audience, you are a doctor, but I always call you Professor Wolff. Professor Richard D. Wolff, he's Professor of Economic Emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor at the Graduate Program in International Affairs of New School University in New York City. He's founder of Democracy at Work, host of their nationally syndicated show, Economic Update. His latest book is Understanding Capitalism, and you have another book called Understanding Socialism.
Right.
And you have another book, Capitalism is a Sickness.
Yes.
It's called When the System is a Sickness, when capitalism fails to save us from pandemics, or itself. And as you pointed out, they're available at www.democracyatwork.info.
Yep.
People can pick up the books there.
Thank you,
Professor,
Jamal.
you have a good, fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for this. Be safe.
Too.
Bye-bye. All right, Professor Richard Wolff, I always appreciate those conversations. I always learn something in those conversations. He has affected my workable point of view. He is one of those few